If you ever want to know what kind of man someone truly is, don't watch what he does when the whole world is cheering. Watch what he chooses when no one is looking. The scream echoed across the rolling pasture just as the afternoon sun poured golden light over the hills outside Ashford Ridge Ranch. Horses scattered in every direction, ranch hands shouted frantic warnings, and a magnificent black thoroughbred burst through the open training gate with terrifying speed. On its back, Claire Ashford fought desperately to steady herself, her riding helmet still secure, but the reins whipped wildly through her trembling hands as the frightened horse ignored every command. Dust exploded beneath pounding hooves while dozens of stunned employees froze, powerless to stop the unfolding disaster. Beyond the next bend waited a narrow ravine hidden behind a stretch of tall cottonwoods, a place every rider on the ranch respected and avoided whenever a horse lost control. Several voices cried out for someone to help, but fear rooted everyone in place. Everyone except Caleb Mercer. He had arrived only 20 minutes earlier in his aging pickup truck, hoping to finish repairing an old cedar fence before sunset. His worn work boots were still coated with dry dirt from another ranch across the county, and his faded denim shirt carried the scent of fresh-cut lumber and honest labor. Beside the truck sat his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, quietly sketching horses in a small notebook while swinging her sneakers over the tailgate. She looked up the instant she heard the panic in the distance. "Dad," she shouted, pointing toward the runaway horse. Caleb never answered. He simply ran. Years of hard work had strengthened his body, but it was something quieter that carried him across the open pasture. Every step was measured. Every breath was calm. Instead of chasing directly behind the terrified animal, he angled across the field, reading its path the way experienced horsemen learned long before they ever earned a paycheck. The wind carried the sharp scent of dry grass as he reached a gentle rise only seconds before the horse thundered past. Time seemed to slow. Claire's frightened eyes met his for the briefest moment, filled not with power or authority but with simple human fear. Caleb stepped forward at exactly the right instant, catching the trailing rein with steady hands while guiding the frightened horse into a wide turning circle instead of fighting against its momentum. The powerful animal gradually slowed, its breathing easing as Caleb spoke softly, almost too quietly to hear. Moments later, the horse stopped completely. Silence settled over the ranch. Claire remained seated for a heartbeat, stunned by how close everything had come to ending differently. Caleb offered his hand only long enough to help her safely to the ground. She stared at him, still catching her breath, searching for words worthy of what had just happened. Before she could speak, another small voice broke the silence. "Daddy!" Emma ran across the pasture and wrapped both arms around Caleb's waist with all the strength her little body possessed. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "I thought I was going to lose you." Caleb knelt beside her, brushing a loose strand of blonde hair behind her ear before smiling with the same quiet warmth that had calmed a frightened horse only moments earlier. "I'm right here, sweetheart," he said softly. "That's where I'll always try to be." Standing only a few feet away, Claire Ashford watched the embrace in complete silence. For the first time in many years, the billionaire CEO realized the most extraordinary thing she had witnessed that day was not the man who had saved her life. It was the father whose first instinct, after risking everything, was simply to make sure his little girl felt safe again. Before the story takes a turn, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss what happens next. And tell me, do you think she should trust him? Let me know in the comments. Now, let's continue. The afternoon settled into an uneasy calm as ranch hands quietly returned frightened horses to their paddocks, yet no one stopped glancing toward the weathered pickup parked beneath an old oak tree. Caleb Mercer knelt beside a loose fence rail, tightening fresh bolts with the same steady patience he had shown only minutes earlier. He worked as though nothing remarkable had happened. Emma sat nearby on an overturned feed bucket, carefully erasing a pencil line from the sketch of the beautiful horse she had just watched from a safe distance. Every few moments she looked toward her father, smiling simply because he was still there. Inside the sprawling ranch headquarters, Claire Ashford stood before the wide office windows overlooking thousands of acres of rolling pasture that had belonged to her family for generations. Executives waited around the polished conference table with quarterly reports, acquisition proposals, and investment forecasts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but she heard almost none of it. Her thoughts kept returning to the quiet man who had risked everything without asking for recognition. Finally she closed the folder in front of her. "Reschedule the meeting," she said calmly. Several executives exchanged surprised looks. Her chief financial officer cleared his throat. "The board has been waiting for these numbers all week." Claire nodded politely. "The numbers can wait another hour." She walked out before anyone could argue. Outside, warm afternoon light stretched across the ranch, carrying the scent of fresh hay and cedar. Caleb was loading worn fencing tools back into his truck when he noticed polished riding boots approaching through the dust. Claire stopped several feet away, careful not to interrupt his work. "I never thanked you properly," she said. Caleb offered a respectful smile. "You already did." She looked puzzled. "I did?" He nodded toward Emma, who was laughing quietly after a friendly ranch dog had stolen one of her shoelaces. "Seeing my little girl smile because everything turned out all right is thanks enough." Claire followed his gaze. The little girl could not have been older than 8, wearing faded blue jeans patched at one knee and a straw hat that looked slightly too large for her head. She radiated a kind of joy money could never manufacture. Claire walked closer. "Hello there." Emma stood politely. "Hello, ma'am. Do you like horses?" Claire asked gently. Emma's eyes brightened before she quickly looked down again. "I love them." "Do you ride?" Emma hesitated, then smiled with quiet honesty. "Only in my dreams." Caleb reached over and squeezed his daughter's shoulder. "Maybe someday." Claire noticed the softness in his voice. There was hope there, but also acceptance. She had spent years negotiating billion-dollar agreements, and she had learned to recognize when someone was hiding disappointment behind kindness. "You have never ridden before?" she asked. Emma shook her head. "Dad says horses deserve respect before excitement. We always stop and watch them whenever we can." Claire felt something unexpectedly tighten inside her chest. She glanced at Caleb. "You know horses remarkably well." He shrugged lightly. "Enough to admire them." It was an answer that revealed almost nothing, yet somehow carried the weight of an entire untold life. As the afternoon breeze stirred across the endless pasture, Claire realized the distance between their worlds could not have been greater. She owned the ranch. He repaired its fences. She traveled by private jet. He counted every gallon of gasoline before accepting another job. Yet standing beneath that old oak tree, surrounded by silence, neither wealth nor status seemed to matter. The only thing that filled the space between them was the unmistakable love of a father who measured every success by the happiness reflected in his daughter's eyes. The following morning arrived beneath a wide blue sky that stretched across the valley like an endless promise. Dew shimmered on the tall grass, and the distant sound of horses moving through open pasture blended with the steady creak of wooden gates welcoming another day. Caleb Mercer pulled his pickup beside the equipment barn just after sunrise, a thermos of black coffee resting beside his toolbox while Emma quietly finished her homework before summer reading hour at the small county library. Their routine was simple, predictable, and built around making every dollar count. Across the ranch, however, the atmosphere felt entirely different. Luxury sport utility vehicles lined the circular drive outside the administration building. Attorneys, financial advisors, and senior executives had arrived earlier than usual after receiving unexpected instructions from Claire Ashford herself. They gathered around the polished conference table as thick folders were placed before each chair. One attorney finally broke the silence. "Miss Ashford, are you certain about this decision?" Claire looked toward the window overlooking the pasture where Caleb was already repairing another section of fencing. "Absolutely." Another advisor adjusted his glasses. The property you selected includes nearly 12,000 acres, the breeding facilities, the training arena, and mineral rights. The estimated value exceeds $1 billion. Claire answered without hesitation. I know exactly what it is worth. The room became silent. One executive finally asked the question everyone had been thinking. Do you believe he will accept? Claire smiled faintly. I do not know. Less than 30 minutes later, a black luxury vehicle stopped beside the old fence where Caleb worked. Emma looked up from her coloring book as three sharply dressed attorneys stepped onto the dusty ground carrying leather portfolios that looked strangely out of place beside weathered fence posts and stacks of cedar lumber. Caleb removed his work gloves and greeted them politely. Good morning. The senior attorney extended his hand. Mr. Mercer, Miss Ashford wishes to formally recognize your extraordinary actions yesterday. Caleb nodded respectfully but remained quiet. The attorney opened a folder and carefully placed several documents across the tailgate of the pickup. These papers transfer ownership of Ashford West Ranch into your name, effective immediately upon your signature. Emma stared at the papers without fully understanding. Caleb looked at the attorney, then back toward the endless fields disappearing beyond the hills. I am afraid there has been a mistake. There has not, the attorney replied. This is Miss Ashford's personal decision. Caleb read only the first page before gently closing the folder. Please thank her for her generosity. The attorney smiled. Then you accept? Caleb slowly shook his head. The attorneys exchanged confused glances. Mr. Mercer, another lawyer said carefully, this property could provide financial security for your family for generations. Caleb rested one hand on the old pickup before speaking with complete sincerity. I already have the greatest treasure I could ever ask for. Emma looked up at her father with quiet curiosity. The attorney frowned gently. Surely there must be something you would accept. Caleb remained silent for several moments while a soft breeze carried the scent of fresh hay across the pasture. Finally he looked toward Emma, whose eyes had drifted once again to a group of horses trotting gracefully beyond the white fence. A gentle smile appeared across his face. Actually, he said quietly, there is one thing. Every attorney leaned forward. If it would not inconvenience Miss Ashford, my daughter has always dreamed of riding a gentle horse just once. Even one short ride would mean more to her than anything written inside those papers. The words settled over the pasture like the morning sunlight itself. No negotiation. No demand. No hidden ambition. Only the quiet wish of a father who measured wealth by the smile of a little girl. When the attorneys returned to the main house and repeated his answer, Claire Ashford stood perfectly still. Surrounded by billion-dollar assets, she found herself deeply moved by a request that money alone had never been able to teach her to value. Saturday morning arrived with cool mountain air drifting across Ashford Ridge Ranch, carrying the scent of pine, fresh hay, and the quiet promise of a beautiful day. Sunlight spilled over the white fences as horses wandered peacefully through emerald pastures, their coats glowing beneath the golden light. Caleb Mercer parked his old pickup near the visitor stable and stepped out, smoothing the wrinkles from Emma's favorite denim jacket before helping her climb down. She stood completely still, her wide blue eyes fixed on the horses grazing only a few yards away. For a long moment she said nothing at all. Then she whispered so softly that only her father could hear, "They are even more beautiful than I imagined." Caleb smiled. They deserve to be admired. Before another word could be spoken, Claire Ashford approached wearing simple riding jeans, polished boots, and a light tan jacket instead of the tailored business suits everyone expected from her. Without the conference rooms and flashing cameras, she seemed almost like a different person. "Good morning," she said warmly. Emma smiled politely. "Good morning, Miss Ashford." Claire looked toward the stable. "I have someone I would like you to meet." A few moments later an older ranch trainer slowly guided a gentle chestnut mare into the sunlight. The horse moved with calm confidence, lowering her head as if greeting an old friend rather than strangers. Her name is Daisy, Claire explained. She has spent years teaching children how to ride. She believes patience is more important than speed. Emma cautiously reached out one small hand. Daisy responded by softly touching the girl's fingers with her nose before letting out a slow, peaceful breath. Emma laughed quietly, and the sound seemed to brighten the entire stable. Claire noticed Caleb watching every movement carefully. He never looked away from his daughter for more than a second. "Would you like to ride beside her?" Claire asked. Caleb gently shook his head. "This is her moment." Emma looked uncertain. "Dad?" Caleb knelt beside her. "Remember what I always told you?" She nodded. "Respect first." "Exactly," he answered. "The horse is trusting you just as much as you are trusting her." Emma took a slow breath and climbed carefully into the saddle with the trainer walking beside Daisy and Caleb staying only a few feet away, matching every step across the soft dirt path. He never once reached for the reins, never tried to take control. He simply remained close enough that Emma knew she would never face a single moment alone. Claire walked several yards behind them in complete silence. She had witnessed championship riders, celebrity investors, and world leaders visit her ranch over the years, yet nothing compared to the quiet scene unfolding before her. There were no reporters. No applause. No contracts waiting to be signed. Only a father smiling because his daughter finally experienced the dream she had carried in her heart for years. Emma looked down from the saddle, her cheeks glowing with happiness. "Dad," she called, "I think Daisy likes me." Caleb laughed softly. "I think she does." Claire felt an unexpected warmth settle deep inside her heart. She had offered land, buildings, and unimaginable wealth, believing those things represented gratitude. Yet one peaceful ride across a sunlit pasture had created more genuine joy than every expensive gift she had ever given. As Emma completed one slow circle around the training arena, she reached down and stretched out her hand. Caleb took it gently without interrupting the horse's steady pace. Neither of them spoke another word. They simply smiled at one another, and in that quiet exchange Claire began to understand that the richest family standing on her ranch was not the one that owned the property. It was the one that knew how to treasure a single beautiful moment together. The peaceful ride became the beginning of a question Claire Ashford could not answer. Long after Caleb and Emma had driven away in their aging pickup, she remained beside the empty training arena, listening to the gentle rustle of cottonwood leaves and the distant rhythm of horses grazing beneath the fading afternoon sun. She had built an empire by studying people, predicting decisions before they were made, and recognizing hidden value where others saw none. Yet the quiet father who had refused unimaginable wealth remained a mystery beyond every business instinct she possessed. Early Monday morning she stepped into the ranch archives, a brick building that had served the property for decades. Dust floated through narrow beams of sunlight as shelves filled with breeding records, employee files, and photographs stretched from floor to ceiling. "Could you help me find something?" she asked the ranch historian, an elderly man named Walter Briggs who had worked there for nearly 40 years. Walter smiled politely. "Anything in particular?" Claire hesitated. "Caleb Mercer." Walter stopped searching almost immediately. A look of surprise crossed his face before it softened into quiet respect. "I wondered how long it would take before someone asked." Claire noticed the tone in his voice. "You know him?" Walter carefully removed an old storage box from a high shelf. Inside were yellowed photographs, faded newspaper clippings, and several ribbons from regional horsemanship competitions. He handed Claire the first photograph. It showed a much younger Caleb standing beside a magnificent gray stallion, smiling with the easy confidence of someone completely at home. 20 years ago, Walter said softly, people drove hundreds of miles just to watch him work with horses. Claire looked up in disbelief. He was a trainer. Walter chuckled gently. Trainer, breeder, instructor, and one of the finest horsemen this state had ever seen. Some people believed he could calm a frightened horse simply by walking into the pasture. Claire turned another photograph. Caleb stood beside a beautiful young woman holding a newborn baby wrapped in a pink blanket. The joy in all three faces seemed almost too bright to belong to another lifetime. His wife? Walter nodded. Her name was Hannah. She loved this ranch almost as much as he did. Claire continued reading until one newspaper clipping caught her attention. The headline celebrated Caleb's growing reputation and described plans for a youth riding academy dedicated to children from working families who could never afford expensive lessons. Another clipping, dated only a year later, carried no celebration at all. It simply announced that the academy project had quietly closed after Hannah passed away following a sudden illness. Walter lowered his eyes. After losing her, he sold nearly everything. The horses. The training business. Even the land they dreamed of building on. Claire swallowed slowly. Why? Walter answered without hesitation. Because his daughter needed him more than any dream ever could. The room became silent except for the ticking of an old wall clock. Claire stared once more at the photograph of Caleb holding baby Emma while Hannah smiled beside them. She finally understood why he had looked at every horse with such gentle confidence and why he had guided a terrified animal without fear. Those skills had never disappeared. He had simply chosen to set them aside. Not because he failed. Because love asked something greater of him. Claire carefully returned every photograph to the storage box. She realized the quiet man repairing fences across her ranch had never been an ordinary laborer at all. He had willingly traded recognition, success, and a remarkable career for one little girl whose happiness had become the center of his entire world, and somehow that sacrifice made him far richer than anyone she had ever met. 3 days later the weather changed without warning. Dark clouds rolled across the valley, covering the afternoon sun with a heavy gray blanket while a restless wind swept through the cottonwood trees and rattled every stable door across the ranch. Horses lifted their heads at once, sensing the shift long before the first distant clap of thunder echoed across the hills. Claire Ashford had just finished inspecting a newly restored pasture when one of the ranch managers came running toward her. "Miss Ashford," he called, breathing hard, "the north stable has a problem. Several horses are frightened, and the automatic gate is not responding." Claire hurried toward the stable as ranch hands moved quickly but calmly, guiding animals toward safer paddocks. The smell of rain mixed with fresh hay filled the air, and anxious whinnies echoed beneath the wooden roof. At that same moment Caleb Mercer was replacing damaged fence boards less than a quarter-mile away. He heard the unusual sounds, set down his hammer, and immediately looked toward the stable. Emma, who had been reading beneath a nearby shade tree, noticed the concern in his eyes. "Dad?" she asked softly. Caleb smiled reassuringly. "Stay here with Mr. Collins until I come back." Emma nodded without hesitation because she trusted him completely. By the time Caleb reached the stable, several employees were already working together to calm the horses. A young mare had become trapped inside a narrow corner after being startled by the loud weather, causing several other horses to grow increasingly nervous. Nobody panicked. Nobody shouted. Caleb quietly stepped inside, removing his work gloves before speaking in a voice so gentle it almost disappeared beneath the sound of the wind. "Easy now," he whispered. "You are all right." Claire watched from only a few feet away. She expected complicated techniques or dramatic commands. Instead she saw something far more remarkable. Caleb slowed his own breathing. His movements became almost effortless, giving every frightened horse time to settle instead of forcing the moment. One by one the animals relaxed. The nervous mare finally stepped away from the corner and followed Caleb toward the open aisle with complete trust. The entire stable seemed to exhale together. Even the wind outside felt quieter. Claire realized she had been holding her own breath. "How did you do that?" she asked. Caleb offered the mare one final reassuring pat along her neck before answering. "Most living things do not need someone stronger. They need someone calmer. The words lingered in the stillness long after he finished speaking. Ranch hands exchanged respectful glances. One older trainer quietly smiled because he had witnessed that same gift many years before. As the clouds slowly drifted east and sunlight began breaking through once again, Claire walked beside Caleb toward the stable entrance. Neither of them spoke for several moments. The air smelled clean after the brief rain, and tiny drops of water shimmered across the white fences surrounding the pasture. Finally Claire looked toward him. "You could have built an extraordinary career here." Caleb looked across the fields where Emma was waving at him from beneath the old oak tree. A peaceful smile appeared on his face. "Maybe," he replied. "But every season of life asks us a different question. Mine asked me who needed me most." Claire followed his gaze until she saw Emma smiling back with complete confidence that her father would always return. In that quiet exchange Claire understood something no financial report had ever measured. Success could fill a bank account. Love could fill an entire lifetime. And standing beside the weathered fence with the scent of rain still lingering in the air, she felt her admiration for Caleb quietly becoming something far deeper than gratitude. The days that followed unfolded with a quiet rhythm that neither Claire Ashford nor Caleb Mercer ever planned, yet neither seemed eager to interrupt. Every afternoon after finishing schoolwork, Emma visited the ranch for another lesson with Daisy, always greeting the gentle mare before speaking to anyone else. Caleb never stood far away. Sometimes he repaired a gate. Sometimes he stacked fresh lumber beside the barn. Sometimes he simply leaned against the white fence, watching with the peaceful expression of a father whose greatest happiness existed a few yards away. Claire found herself rearranging meetings she once considered impossible to postpone, choosing instead to spend an hour near the training arena. She rarely joined the lessons. She simply observed. The laughter of one little girl had slowly become the most valuable sound anywhere on the property. One cool evening, after the last lesson had ended, Emma sat on the fence beside Claire with an apple in one hand while Daisy quietly munched hay nearby. The western sky glowed orange and gold, painting long shadows across the pasture. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Finally Emma looked toward Claire with the open honesty only children possess. "Miss Ashford?" Claire smiled warmly. "Yes. Do you ever get lonely?" The unexpected question lingered in the evening air. Claire looked toward the distant hills before answering truthfully. "Sometimes." Emma nodded as though she understood more than most adults ever could. "Dad gets lonely too." Claire turned gently toward the little girl. "Has he told you that?" Emma shook her head. "He does not have to. Sometimes he sits on our porch after I fall asleep. He looks at the stars and smiles, but it is the kind of smile people make when they miss someone." Claire felt her heart grow unexpectedly heavy. "Your father loved your mother very much." Emma smiled softly. "He still does." A gentle breeze lifted loose strands of the little girl's hair as she continued. "But I think Mom would want him to smile again." Claire remained completely silent. Emma looked across the pasture where Caleb was carefully closing the stable doors for the evening. "When you are around," she whispered, "he laughs more." Claire lowered her eyes, suddenly unable to answer. The words were innocent. There was no hidden intention behind them. Only the quiet observation of a daughter who knew her father better than anyone else. At that moment Caleb walked toward them carrying Emma's small riding helmet. "Ready to head home, sweetheart?" he asked. Emma accepted the helmet, then surprised both adults by gently taking Claire's hand for just a second. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for Daisy." Claire squeezed her fingers lightly. "You are very welcome." Emma skipped toward the pickup while Caleb remained beside the fence. "I hope she has not been talking too much," he said with an apologetic smile. Claire shook her head. "She reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago." Caleb looked curious but did not ask. He had learned that meaningful truths never needed to be rushed. They stood together watching the sun disappear behind the rolling hills while the horses settled quietly into the evening. There were no grand declarations. No promises. Only the peaceful comfort of shared silence. For the first time in many years, Claire realized she was no longer waiting for Caleb to save her from danger. She was quietly hoping he would become part of the ordinary days she never wanted to end. 1 month later, the ranch welcomed guests from across the county for what everyone believed would be an ordinary community appreciation day. Families wandered between white barns decorated with wildflowers, children laughed as ponies carried young riders along shaded trails, and local musicians filled the afternoon with gentle country melodies drifting through the warm summer air. Caleb Mercer arrived early with Emma, expecting nothing more than another peaceful Saturday among horses she had grown to love. He noticed a small stage near the center pasture, but thought little of it. Claire Ashford greeted visitors with her usual grace, though those who knew her well sensed something different in her quiet smile. When nearly everyone had gathered beneath the large oak trees, she stepped onto the wooden platform and welcomed the crowd. "This ranch has always been known for raising remarkable horses," she began. "Today I hope it becomes known for something even more important." Curious whispers spread through the audience before silence gradually settled over the field. Claire continued, "A few weeks ago I offered someone an extraordinary gift because I believed gratitude could be measured by wealth. I was wrong." She looked toward Caleb, who immediately lowered his eyes with quiet humility. "The man who saved my life asked for only one thing. One peaceful ride for his daughter. That single request reminded me that kindness does not measure success by what we keep. It measures success by what we share." She paused as several children gathered near the front of the stage. "Beginning today, Ashford Ridge Ranch will open a permanent horseback therapy and riding program for children whose families could never afford opportunities like this. Every lesson will be completely free." Warm applause spread across the crowd, but Claire gently raised one hand. "There is one more announcement." She turned toward Caleb. "I asked many experienced trainers to help lead this program. None of them understood horses the way one quiet father does." Caleb looked genuinely surprised. Claire smiled. "If he is willing, Caleb Mercer will become the director of our new Riding with Hope program, where children will learn not only how to ride but also how patience, respect, and kindness can change a life." The applause grew louder, yet Caleb remained still. After a long moment he walked slowly toward the stage, his work boots carrying traces of sawdust instead of polished leather. He accepted the microphone with both hands, looking first toward Emma before facing the crowd. "I am honored," he said softly. "But only if every child who comes here feels welcome, no matter where they come from or how much money their family has." Claire nodded immediately. "That promise has already been written into the program." Emma clapped so enthusiastically that several nearby children joined her laughter. Before stepping away from the microphone, Caleb looked toward the rows of smiling families filling the pasture. "The best horses teach us something simple," he said. "They do not care who owns the biggest house. They only respond to the heart standing beside them." The crowd fell into thoughtful silence before another wave of applause rolled across the valley. Claire watched him leave the stage without seeking recognition, stopping first to kneel beside Emma and ask whether she was enjoying the day. In that quiet moment she realized the greatest leader she had ever met was not the one who stood beneath the spotlight. It was the man who always stepped away from it so someone else could smile. 1 year passed with the quiet certainty of changing seasons, and Ashford Ridge Ranch had become something no business plan could have predicted. Every week children from small towns, farming families, military households, and neighborhoods where dreams often felt too expensive arrived with nervous smiles and hopeful hearts. Some had never touched a horse before. Others carried fears they could not explain. Yet before each lesson Caleb Mercer greeted every child exactly the same way, with patience, respect, and the gentle reminder that trust was always earned one calm step at a time. The Riding with Hope program had grown beyond anyone's expectations, not because of expensive facilities or impressive advertisements, but because families spoke about the peace they found there. They spoke about the quiet instructor who remembered every child's name and celebrated every small victory as though it were the greatest achievement in the world. On a warm autumn afternoon, golden leaves drifted across the pastures while Emma stood beside a beautiful young chestnut mare wearing a brand new saddle carefully fitted just for her. Caleb adjusted the stirrups one final time before stepping back with a proud smile. "She is yours now," he said softly. Emma's eyes filled with happy tears. "Really?" Caleb nodded. "You have earned her trust, and she has earned yours." Emma threw her arms around him before gently hugging the mare's neck. Nearby, Claire Ashford watched the moment unfold from the white wooden fence where she had quietly stood for several minutes without interrupting. She no longer came to the ranch only as its owner. She came because it had become the place where her own heart finally felt at home. Emma climbed carefully into the saddle and guided the mare across the training field with calm confidence. The little girl who once believed she could ride only in her dreams now moved beneath the open sky with grace, gratitude, and joy shining across her face. Caleb folded his arms and watched in peaceful silence. Claire stepped beside him. "She has grown so much," she whispered. "She has," Caleb answered. "Sometimes I still see the little girl who sat on the tailgate drawing horses she thought she would never meet." Claire smiled gently. "And now she is helping younger children believe in themselves." They stood together as laughter floated across the ranch and dozens of young riders practiced under the warm afternoon sun. Finally Claire reached for Caleb's hand. This time he did not hesitate. Their fingers rested together naturally, quietly, as though they had always belonged that way. She looked toward him with eyes filled not with admiration alone but with deep affection built one ordinary day after another. "You changed this place," she said. Caleb slowly shook his head. "No. Kindness did." Claire glanced toward Emma, who waved happily from the far side of the arena before guiding her mare through another gentle circle. "What is your greatest reward after everything that has happened?" she asked. Caleb watched his daughter laugh beneath the wide American sky. His smile was calm, humble, and completely certain. Seeing her smile, he answered. "That has always been enough." Claire's eyes glistened as she squeezed his hand just a little tighter. "It is enough for me too." The afternoon breeze carried the soft sound of hoofbeats across the endless fields while the sun settled slowly beyond the western hills. Wealth had built the ranch. Compassion had transformed it into a home. And in the peaceful silence that followed, everyone who looked across those golden pastures understood the quiet truth that the richest life is never measured by what a person owns, but by the love they leave growing in the hearts of others. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more emotional stories like this. And before you go, what state are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. See you in the next story.